and my hand hath found as a nest the riches of the people, and as so I have gathered all the earth, and there was none to move the wing, open the mouth, or peeped. Shall the axe boast itself against him, that heweth that should lift itself up as if it were no wood?
Okay, good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. We're continuing the book of Isaiah. And that was Isaiah chapter 10, a recording you can find on my website, oraclesofgod.org. And also referring to the Assyrian, which is the subject now. So you remember, we had the part where Rabshakeh delivers the message of the great king, the king of Assyria, to the people on the wall and to the men of the city, promising them they have no chance of survival or winning in a fight. And it's a joke. It apparently is like a joke. I mean, it very much seems like they're very derisive. Can you put out perhaps 2,000 men on horses? Do you have enough men to? I've got 2,000 extra horses. I've got 2,000 horses. You're going to get horses from Egypt? Do you even have men? I mean, it's from the context of it. They're there with 100,000 men, or what? How much was it? Oh, whatever. Those details are not particularly critical. Well, the exact number. The outnumbered is probably, outnumbered, not exactly. I don't know how many people would have lived in the city at the time. But a great number of the people had been already carried away captive. As was said. So wait. Surrender. They may have even been encouraging mutiny. Again, I mean, I don't know that they would have made peace with Hezekiah, who had rebelled against them and served him not. No, but, they'd spare everyone else. They're basically trying to encourage a revolt. Are there 2,000 men that would like to come with us and ride on horses? You can come riding on horses, or you can come being dragged in chains, usually naked. And it came to pass, when Hezekiah heard it, that he rent his clothes and covered himself with sackcloth and went into the house of the Lord. Yeah, they had rent their clothes, and now he rents his clothes. And girds himself with sackcloth, the color of mourning, because it's so dark for him right in that moment. And he sent Eliakim, who was over the household, and Shebna the scribe, and the elders of the priests, covered with sackcloth, unto Isaiah the prophet, the son of Amos. And they said unto him, This day is a day of trouble, and of rebuke, and of blasphemy. For the children are come to the birth, and there is not strength to bring forth. It may be that the Lord God will hear the words of Rabshakeh, who the king of Assyria, his master, has sent to reproach the living God. And he will reprove the words which the Lord thy God hath heard. Wherefore lift up thy prayer for the remnant that is left. So the servants of King Hezekiah came to Isaiah, and Isaiah said unto them, Thus shall ye say to your master, Thus saith the Lord, Be not afraid of the words that thou hast heard, wherewith the servants of the king of Assyria have blasphemed me. Behold, I will send a blast upon him, and he shall hear a rumor, and return to his own land. And I will cause him to fall by the sword in his own land. So Rabshakeh returned and found the king of Assyria warring against Libnah, for he had heard that he was departed from Lachish. And he heard say concerning Tirhakah, king of Ethiopia, He has come forth to make war with thee. And when he heard it, he sent messengers to Hezekiah, saying, Thus shall ye speak to Hezekiah king of Judah, saying, Let not thy God, in whom thou trustest, deceive thee, saying, Jerusalem shall not be given into the hand of the king of Assyria. Behold, thou hast heard what the kings of Assyria have done to all lands by destroying them utterly. And shalt thou be delivered? Have the gods of the nations delivered them which my fathers have destroyed, as Gozan and Haran and Rezeph, and the children of Eden which were at Telassar? Where is the king of Hamath, and the king of Arpad, and the king of the city of Sepharvaim, Hena, and Iva? I'm not sure about those pronunciations. And Hezekiah received the letter from the hand of the messengers and read it. And Hezekiah went up to the house of the Lord and spread it before the Lord. And Hezekiah prayed to the Lord, saying, O Lord of hosts, God of Israel, that dwellest between the cherubims, thou art God, even thou alone. Of all the kingdoms of the earth, thou hast made heaven and earth. Incline thine ear, O Lord, and hear. Open thine eyes, O Lord, and see, and hear all the words of Sennacherib, which hath sent to reproach the living God. Of a truth, Lord, the kings of Assyria have laid waste all the nations and their countries, and have cast their gods into the fire, for they were no gods, but the work of men's hands, wood and stone. Therefore they have destroyed them. Now therefore, O Lord our God, save us from his hand, that all the kingdoms of the earth may know that thou art the Lord, even thou only. Then Isaiah the son of Amos sent to Hezekiah, saying, Thus saith the Lord God of Israel, Whereas thou hast prayed to me against Sennacherib king of Assyria, this is the word which the Lord hath spoken concerning him. The virgin, the daughter of Zion, hath despised thee, and laughed thee to scorn. The daughter of Zion hath shaken her head at thee. Whom hast thou reproached and blasphemed? And against whom hast thou exalted thy voice, and lifted up thine eyes on high, even against the Holy One of Israel? By thy servants hast thou reproached the Lord, and said, By the multitude of my chariots am I come up to the height of the mountains, to the sides of Lebanon, and I will cut down the tall cedars thereof, and the choice fir trees thereof, and I will enter into the height of his border, and the forest of his Carmel. I have digged, and drunk water, and with the sole of my feet I dried up all the rivers of the besieged places. Hast thou not heard long ago how I have done it, and of ancient times that I have formed it? Now have I brought it to pass, that thou shouldest be to lay waste defenced cities to ruinous heaps. Therefore their inhabitants were of small power. They were dismayed and confounded. They were as the grass of the field and as the green herb, as the grass on the housetops and as corn blasted before it be grown up. But I know thy abode, and thy going out, and thy coming in, and thy rage against me, because thy rage against me and the tumult is come up into mine ears. Therefore will I put my hook in thy nose, and my bridle in thy lips, and I will turn thee back by the way which thou camest. And this shall be a sign unto thee. Ye shall eat this year such as groweth of itself, and the second year that which springeth of the same. And in the third year sow ye and reap, and plant vineyards, and eat the fruit thereof. And the remnant that is escaped of the house of Judah shall again take root downward, and bear fruit upward. For out of Jerusalem shall go forth a remnant, and they that escape out of Mount Zion, and they that escape out of Mount Zion, the zeal of the Lord of hosts shall do this. Therefore, thus saith the Lord concerning the king of Assyria, He shall not come into this city, nor shoot an arrow there, nor come before it with shields, nor cast a bank against it. By the way that he came, by the same shall he return, and shall not come into this city, saith the Lord. For I will defend this city to save it for my own sake, and for my servant David's sake. Then the angel of the Lord went forth, and smote the camp of the Assyrians 185,000. And when they arose early in the morning, behold, they were all dead corpses. So Sennacherib, king of Assyria, departed, and went and returned, and dwelt at Nineveh. And it came to pass, he was worshipping in the house of Nisroch, his god, the Adremelech, and Sharezer his sons smote him with the sword, and they escaped into the land of Armenia. And Esarhaddon his son reigned in his stead. So that's the end of Sennacherib, king of Assyria at that time. So that's quite a lot of story there to cover. So yeah, I really enjoyed reading that. There's just a part in the middle where I felt like I didn't quite get it's hard to get all the phrasing exactly right. So he tears his clothes in this morning, right? He goes, and in the spirit of mourning, he turns to the Lord. He goes into the house of God, because that's the only place we're going to get the help. When we really need, because here's the thing. His message to the king of Assyria is what? I did it long ago, and now it's come to pass. It's all arranged. That's why it says all things work together for good for those that love God. And it's like, and that doesn't, I'll tell you what, and you think it doesn't include, here's the thing. You can't make sense of this world without including, I made it so you would lay waste cities, and they were therefore of small power. I ordained you, because the only way God can take it up righteously is this was what I planned all along. It hasn't fallen apart yet. The human experiment. You've ever heard that phrase? It's pregnant with meaning, isn't it? But of all the gods of the heathen, where are they? Where are they, the gods of our pad? I don't know, but I know where the Lord of hosts, the God of Jerusalem on Mount Zion is. Everyone sure does. Even the Muslims they say that's the same God. They didn't want to get, they recognize that the true God emanates from something there. They may have changed the story a bit. Or they probably think, it's always the other way too, right? They claim we changed the story, which it's hard to, the thing is, the Dead Sea Scrolls sort of put that all to rest. As far as the Old Testament pre-Christ is pretty much the same as the Old Testament post-Christ, except for a few little things. All right. So he is. So the servants of the Hezekiah come. They go to the prophet to ask at the prophet's mouth, what does the Lord say about this? Because Hezekiah wants to look to the Lord. Maybe Shebna is not so excited about that, but Eliakim, who's been appointed, right? But he's coming in the proper spirit. When we come to God, we got to come humbly, because we don't know what's going on, and we don't understand. And often that's a time. And here's the thing. That's why God is also patient. But look into your heart. It's like the heart is deceitful and desperately wicked above all things. It's like, a human being can lie about how virtuous and wonderful they are to other people or whatever. Oh, never me. I don't think these things. I don't know anyone's mind. Who knows the things of a man? Say the spirit of man that is in him. No man knoweth the things of the Lord except the Spirit of God give it to them. And so I'm utterly helpless before the Lord, and I'm grateful for his mercy. And because it's like, because I know I need it. You know what I mean? And if, we all come to God as sinners. Not a one of us is righteous, no, not one. And it's like, and to come to God with accusations towards him, it's like, look inside your heart. Before you start judging the world, judge your own self. Are you uncorrupt and the world is just corrupt? Or is the world perfectly, or are we the corruptors of the world? And so there's some external force really making it. I mean, we are tempted when we lust out of our hearts. The temptation comes from within. It's us. We're the problem. We talk about the world. That means the world as ordered with men, and also this, and the residual spirits of men, and the spirits of devils which walk among us. They do, because that's the thing. Is like those ideas live on and on. They have their echoes in families and in culture, and they speak anew again. There's nothing really that hasn't been before in the world of human beings as far as the wickedness. It just takes on a new, shinier, modern form. So he wants the Lord to hear the words of Rabshakeh, right? I thought the reading, I hope, made it kind of come to life, because breaking it down in a passage like this, I'm glad I started reading whole passages, because I felt like I got a lot just reading it. But let's see if there's any, we'll pick out any things that need explanation, hopefully. So the rebuke, this is a day of trouble, rebuke, of blasphemy. For the children are come to the birth, and there's not strength to bring forth. That is such a prophetic, like the Isaiah 66. That's one of the very last things it says. Shall I bring to the birth and not cause to bring forth? Shall I cause to bring forth and shut the womb? Rejoice ye with Jerusalem, and be glad with her, all ye that mourn for her. She's the woman who brings forth the man-child. Ultimately, heavenly Jerusalem, that bride image of Revelation. Same thing here. There's a woman bringing forth a child, and that child is the Son of God, Christ. But it's also us. It is also, it's like, it is she is at one point his bride, and also image as the mother, because God became a man. And had to come through a woman to become a man, a human woman. Or that's how he would do it. I mean, he could become a man just by manifesting himself in bodily shape, which he may have done already, in some way, but not through the birth process. And that's why that was in particular. But even that is not even why he is the Son of God, though. I mean, as far as, that's probably why that designation, that distinction between Father and Son is because he would be born and is therefore like a son. You know what I mean? Because in their relationship is like a father and son, one of deference and respect, like an adult one, not like a juvenile one. There is a decisive, and it's almost, there's an interesting thing about humanity. We have two sides of our brain, and I'm not saying this is God, but it's like, it's in some ways, like they do think differently and can think independently, and people have survived with just half a brain. Or they can separate them. I forget how it goes, but there's a lot of weird things with that. But that's not God, because that's a physical thing. But the fact that you can, I don't want to say it like that, because that's, when people get into analogies to humanity, when they talk about the Trinity, that's where you get into trouble, because in some way you always mess it up. Because it's best to just go with what the scriptures say, and then let God reveal the ultimate truth when we know him as we are known of him. You know what I mean? So, I don't, as I'm trying to think about that, I'm like, that's an interesting thought. I was thinking more about, we are also born. Jerusalem is the mother of us all, it says. She is our mother. As Christ was born and became a man and grew up into the Son of God, right? So also we, through Christ, are born again and grow up into sons of God. But human, like he was like, the Lord himself, the Father. But, the thought was that if you would look upon God, you would die. If you actually saw God. But then there are these instances, even in the Old Testament, of people seeing God, kind of. You know what I mean? Like Moses sees his hinder parts. Gideon sees something, and then he says, I have seen God. I don't know if he's right, but he thought he saw God and lived. But the question is, did he truly see God, or did he see God, perhaps the Son, pre-incarnate? Because generally, to see God in his entirety, I think in some sense would be more than man could handle. I believe that there's somehow that, like, you really want to see God is like, maybe I'm not ready to see God, in some way, because I'm unholy, I'm unclean, and all things that come into that presence, they just burn up. I don't know. But I'm not sure that that's actually just as was reputed, but it's quite specific. It's like, I don't know. But anyways, Christ, when you see him though, we don't die, we live. He is God that can be seen and touched by men because he walked among men. And he was touched by men. He had flesh and bones like we do. He was not a spirit. And he was the son of David also. So that's important because that comes into this. But this birthing analogy, in the New Testament talks us being born again. It also says we should grow up into Christ. Literally, it says that. We'll grow up. We should grow up into the image of Christ, essentially. Not that we become ourselves God, but we are become, like it says, the sons of God. You can't be God because God is from everlasting to everlasting. He's eternal. And there's no created thing that could ever be that. That's why God is only God. There is no other. But he has, in his grace and mercy, looked upon the depraved state of man, which he created in his image, for a purpose, and decided to take that which was made of the dust and raise it up and make it into sons. Son and daughters, of course, but I just saying sons because in the analogy in the Old Testament, in the patriarchal way that the world is ordered, the world is just sort of bound to be somewhat patriarchal because men are better at being dominant. That's the whole violent and dominant and da-da-da. It's like, yeah, generally they are. Yes. And women are not as aggressive, more submissive, etc. And that's why they generally don't become leaders. And when they do, they often mimic stereotypical male characteristics, even in their voices, even in their gesturing and all that stuff. They say to him, thus saith Hezekiah, this is the day. Oh, we read that? Yeah. But the world is somewhat like that, but sons and daughters included. There's neither male nor female in Christ, because it's not about that stuff. It is about everlasting life in fellowship with God. And it is an intimate existence. An intimate eternity in communion with God. I'd like to, from what I've tasted of existence in the world and with God's mercy and his goodness, It's like, yeah, I want to do what's right in order to please God so that I could inherit all that he has made, because that's the offer. You can inherit as a son. That's the point. You are the heir. That's why it's a son. It's not the daughter, because the daughter gets married off to another guy. That's how that went. It was, you are my son. You are my heir. And he makes us heirs with him, with Christ. That's why we are granted to sit with him in his throne. You know, read all those things in the first couple of chapters of Revelation. It very much binds us to him. You know, we are the candlesticks. You know, the tube. I was I was thinking about the game Clue. Wasn't one of the murder weapons the candlestick? It may be that the Lord thy God will hear the words of Rabshakeh. Okay. And so Hezekiah seeks to the prophet. He hath heard, lift up thy prayer for the remnant that is left. Again, as I've been talking all along, and as it said in the last chapter, all the defense cities of Judah have been taken. My hair is just goofy today. I'm just going to leave it goofy. Who cares? Can't do nothing about it. And we could flatten it. There we go. The remnant that is left. So the servants of King Hezekiah came to Isaiah. And Isaiah said unto them, Thus shall you say to your master, saith the Lord, Be not afraid of the words that thou hast heard, wherewith the servants of the king of Assyria have blasphemed me. So he assures him and then sends this blast, and he shall hear a rumor and return to his own land, and I will cause him to fall by the sword in his own land. So he tells us what's going to happen at the end here at the beginning. So Rabshakeh goes back to the king of Assyria to get further instructions, because I suppose that he would want to be there for the actual siege, and it is a significant city. Hezekiah has prepared well for the siege. That's another thing. He really prepared well. The remnant that's left is extremely loyal to Hezekiah and to the Lord, because that was one of the things the Lord had promised, is those that trusted in the Lord would escape. And so now they are concentrated at Jerusalem. So let's see. So Rabshakeh returned and found the king of Assyria warring against Libnah, for he heard he was departed. So he was at Lachish, and he went to Libnah, and now Rabshakeh is following him, and he heard say concerning the king of Ethiopia, he heard a rumor. He has come forth to make war with ye. I didn't say ye, but it sounded like it. And when he heard it, he sent messengers to Hezekiah saying, so he heard this rumor about Ethiopia, and so that kind of drew his focus, whatever, and so he sends a messenger with another threat. And maybe there's a tiny bit of... Here's the thing. Very violent men who rule with violence and do violence. God knows Sennacherib and his rage against the Creator, his rage against God, this godless God. He doesn't fear God. He has the gods of this and that. He doesn't believe in gods. All thought of higher powers. He's the power. That's how he feels. I'm the power with my hand. With these hands, I took the nest. I took the nations of the world as if they were some abandoned nest of a bird. I just plucked the eggs right out. I'm awesome. That's how he thinks of himself. Gods, powers, I'm the power. That's what he's become. And he knows his rage. These godless they fear not God. That's why I say is ultimately I fear not them, because they can slay me. God will raise me up, and the judgment will be sure. And I fear, not that I do I fear violence and pain? Oh yes. But deep down, I won't let that fear affect my behavior. At least while I have freedom of movement, I will do as I'm freely commanded of God. While my tongue is still in my mouth, I'll speak what God tells me to speak. And he said, oh, don't let the God whom you trust deceive you. You're deceived by God. This makes me think of when I got threats from somebody, and he's like, don't say that God will protect you. I won't lie that, when I heard this morning that, or actually last night, well, it was this morning I heard it, but it was something from last night. They're like, they're moving all these non-English speaking Afghanis into bases near where I live. I think, maybe I'm not heavily armed enough. Maybe I'm not heavily armed enough. Because if they're going to be bringing in hundreds of thousands of people from other countries and invade our country, then, I ought to probably just shore up. That's what it makes me start thinking. I usually don't think of that because the authorities in our country, I do trust to abide by law and order. Like a sense of, if you're not a violent man, you should find no trouble with any law enforcement agency in the United States of America. I mean, as far as, there are other things people can do besides violence, like fraud and other, if you're not committing violence or some other crime, you shouldn't have much trouble with them. If you're just speaking your opinions or teaching the Bible, you should be able to say what you want to say. Because this is religion. They have no say. When I talk about what God's going to do, like God will smite, I could say, God will smite Joe Biden. I could say that, and that would probably be a bad thing to say. I'm not saying it. Because God smites all the wicked. You know what I mean? I don't need to say anything specific about anything because God didn't give me any prophecy concerning such things. You know what I mean? But a prophet should be able to say those things. Not that, I'll tell you what, no one should take it in their hands to do such things. That's why I'm very anti-violence. Though I at heart am a violent man. I know that. It's like in my rage, there's violence. I've not really been violent. Except a few times in my life. Most of them before I was a serious Christian. But still, it's there. Well, also, you kind of get it out of you by doing physical activity and stuff, It's helpful. Men often have problems with anger and frustration because the world can be a difficult place to navigate. If we trust in the Lord, we can find peace. I can't say that I always have peace. I do always have peace. I just don't always avail myself of the peace God gives me. Meaning, I can sort of choose to not be at peace about something and not trust the Lord. He's given me his peace. I should have it. Meaning I have it. I have the peace of God. I don't understand it. It surpasses understanding. Because it's like if I try to understand why I should be at peace, it won't make any sense to me. Because I got 1,000 reasons to be worried. I got 1,000 things to be fearful of. I got a million and one reasons to think. I'm just saying this as a human, not necessarily me personally. I don't have a million and one reasons. It's like I have a lot of good things in life. God has been very good to me, and I say that also having quite a few challenges. Like I said, I'm not a rich man by any measure. With my children and wife and my home, yes, I'm very content. I'm not at all like, oh, I need a bigger house. I need a bigger this, or I need more kids or another wife or something like that. No, I'm content, and I have peace in that. But there are other things, sometimes that trouble me. A lot of times it's the Lord's work. And it's probably really dumb, but because I guess I always try to do my utmost. And I always feel like that could be better. And so that's probably a profitable attitude. I don't know. It's the Lord himself was a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. Like grieving is in being sad or being disappointed. And those emotions are not always, especially directed towards yourself in a non-detrimental way. Because you can get too much down on yourself. But to have a bit of feeling of regret, remorse is often powerful. Well, I've made mistakes out of how bad it made me feel. It taught me to stay away, like emotionally. Just as touching a hot stove, the bad feeling of burning your hands will cause you to stop doing things like that. So also, when you take actions that harm you emotionally, you should think in the same. So let's see. Deceive thee. Jerusalem shall not be given. I'm going to take all the nations. You've heard what we did, the kings of Assyria. He was not the first. You know, I mean, this has been a succession of kings. And I forget, the names, the detailed historical Sennacherib, people get into like, who was these guys? I don't. I'm not going to bother. It's enough to understand the biblical text. If you want to get into all that extra, there's so much in the Bible to learn. Unfortunately, most people, when you learn about the Bible, they approach it with the same analytical thing that like they were taking apart this microphone. And I'm sorry, taking this thing apart may help you understand some things about how it works, but it doesn't make you understand exactly how to use it either. I guess that's not exactly a good analogy. It's not a great analogy. But what I'm saying is the whole is not always the sum of its parts. I mean, you can like a human being is a better example. You can say, oh, you made the bones and the fingers and this and that and the other. But like, what makes John John? Why is that individual? The individuality of him. Where's that coming from? Explain that. It becomes very complicated for man. More complicated than our brains can perceive. Like the seeming, like because even though they believe in a completely materialistic view of the world, they realize at some level the complexity is so high that they can't predict things. That's where they get into the idea of, is there any such thing as free will? Because many materialists believe, of course not. Which also would agree with the idea of the God, of course, has created all things also, and it's sort of determined. But like they say, it's so complicated that for us, the determination is like, it doesn't matter that it's determined, because it's so complicated and real that I'm conscious of being myself and making my own decisions. So I'm conscious enough to be accountable within God's predestined world, because I am who I am. Whatever God made is me, and I've come into consciousness. I am this conscious entity that has come into the world, and so are you, and you are who you are. That's why I say, look into your heart. Who am I? What am I? What do I really care about? What do I love? What is the selfishness, greed, lust? Those are usually the terms. It often is. That's why, man, to be an heir with God and to be entrusted with, imagine, like they have these gods flying around in the sky and they throw their power and their beams and whatever, they do. I'm just trying to be unspecific, but they have their little powers and they have godlike. But imagine a world in which, and you can see in that, running around with all kinds of power. And what do you get? You get massive wars. You know what I mean? You get massive wars and massive evil. And so it is the end of the world. Even in this small, limited capacity, man is capable of so much destruction. I mean, the king of Assyria, what they did to all lands by destroying them utterly. And you're going to be delivered? See, they see we're the gods. We're the most powerful thing. Because ultimately a god is a sort of power. In fact, the word El, the Hebrew word that would most closely approximate the English idea of what a god is. At least it's used that way. Elohim or El. El might be the name. I forgot. Elohim maybe would be better. Which is actually a plural, which is actually gods. And it doesn't really mean gods. The word, it means like strength, I believe, as I recall. I'm not going to look it up right now, but I just remember that from long ago. The root idea behind it is what I should say, is strength. Like behind that. And it is a kind of a power. And so that's why, they have like Zeus is the power of thunder, and Hera, his wife, the power of the hearth and of motherhood, And so they were the gods and goddesses of those things, right? And the people would pray to them and ask them, and none of them could deliver. None of these gods of these nations. Because there were all kinds of gods risen up. And the Assyrian goes through and sweeps and kills and destroys and carries captive. And shall he not do the same to the God of Israel, which is at Jerusalem? Sweep him away? And the gods of those nations, where are they? Who are they? They're forgotten. Not entirely. Like as Paul says, the things that the heathen worship, they worship devils. They're evil spirits. Not just evil spirits, but they're like just spirits of the world. They become corrupted by man because they make their gods like unto corruptible man. That's what it says. That's what it said. Instead of worshiping the living God, they worshiped something like man. That's why the gods of the heathen are like men. Not just in appearance. Oftentimes they'd be chimeric, meaning they would be part man, part animal, like the Egyptian gods you may be very familiar with, but there were many other gods that were also, the Assyrians worshiped the fish-headed god, I believe. That's at least what I learned when I studied long ago, Jonah, and I think it may even be in the notes of my Bible. Maybe we'll do Jonah sometime. We'll see. Certainly there are many strange things that go on in the world. And with God, we're talking, it's like some of the things are very odd to be reported, aren't they? So, all these different nations, the children of Eden, where's the king of Hamath, the king of Arphad, the king of, what he's saying is like, Hezekiah is the one, don't let your God, and don't let Hezekiah deceive you. The kings and the gods of these nations are nothing before me. And he's more probably interested in Hezekiah as a character than he is in the Lord. At least as far as his thoughts. Like I said, God says, I know your rage against me. Because the real God men hate. The God that gnaws at their conscience. As far as like the fact that all men, that there is, because there is a truth in the world, the voice of God has gone out into the world. And men in their hearts, in their heart of hearts, and their consciences understand when they do evil, that they're doing evil. And they want to believe they're not doing it in the sight of God. And often they do believe. When they don't, it turns to rage. It's because people will still say, no, there's a God, and they don't feel it. They don't see him. They don't know him. They don't really want to know them. They'd rather do the evil. But the thought that there is something to answer to over the evil they do enrages them. Assyria, right, we've covered these nations and stuff. I'm not going to go talking about where they are specifically on a map or some stuff like that. Let's just say all these far-flung kingdoms I've conquered. So Hezekiah he spreads the letter out and prays over it, presumably. Spread it out in front of the Lord and then prays. Thou that dwellest between the cherubims. He would have been looking right at the old temple. The old temple. Solomon's temple. Not the one that Jesus walked in, because the temple will be destroyed. Because that has to happen too. That has to happen too. The Lord must deliver his city, and he also must destroy it. Because it is both his city and not his city. When we cover prophets like Jeremiah and Ezekiel, we will see that aspect of it. Of how, like I said, there's like that, the virgin daughter of Zion, who has kept the Lord's word, who has, Hezekiah has reformed, and the Lord has purged, using the king of Assyria. He has carried away captive many, and now the people who are concentrated at Jerusalem, who have fled there probably for defense, are probably all very pious people, because that's what the Lord would have worked to deliver those who trust in him, and through the prophet Isaiah, you think about his warnings and stuff. Who would heed? Who would hear? Who would know? But they listen. and heed the warning. The prophet had been saying Assyria would come. And what people who would survive? People who would go out into the countryside. They would be the inheritors of the land. They would, that was what he was saying. Because the land is going to be stripped. So he brings in, he recounts. He says, hear the words that he has said. And it's true, Lord. The kings of Assyria have laid waste to all the nations in their countries. He became a king as a young man, 25. And I don't think, what is it, the year of his, which year is it of his reign? 14. So now he's 39. Not a very old man. Still pretty young for a king. But, and actually that's interesting. Because the age of men that would be taken for war, at least according, in the time of Joshua, was the men 40 and upward. Those were the men of war, oddly. Well, because the young men, it was like, they should make children, and the older guys will fight. Not that they didn't have young people fighting, but I'm just saying that was the official number in the days of Joshua. They were considered the men of war. Certainly men who were responsible for the wars, the men who should be accountable for the wars should all be in that age range, right? So, what verse were we on? Not that far. Okay, yeah. In 19, they've cast their gods in the fire, therefore they have destroyed them. Now therefore, O Lord our God, save us from his hand, that all the kingdoms of the earth may know that thou art the Lord, even thou only. And see, they have swept away all these gods. And now, that thou mayest be known. I mean, I don't know that he's thinking, he said that, but that's the way I see it. He used the king of Assyria to sweep away all these gods and to deliver Jerusalem and to make a name for himself. That the inhabitants of the earth, do they not know? Have they not heard? It's been a long time, and it's still true. Save us from his hand. Because if you do, that's what they'll know. At least it will send a message. It's not necessarily that everyone believes it, but it's one more cause that we do believe. I mean, because the very fact of the deliverance and that Isaiah, his prophecy is preserved, is because it came to pass, as the prophet said, and because the city was delivered and not destroyed, and the temple persisted for another century or so. Give or take a decade or so. I'm not sure exactly. I forgot how long. It's not terribly long later. Just a few generations. Well, what doesn't happen in a few generations, It's not sort of amazing and unbelievable. And eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage until the day that Noah entered into the ark and the flood came and took them all away. People just kind of sleep away till they're suddenly swept away. And think about when the pandemic came, the way it shocked people and the way they just bent the knee and obediently did what they were told and are still doing what they were told. For the most part, we have a mask mandate again in Illinois, but I'm greatly heartened by the fact that it seems like now more like 20% of the people, whereas before it seemed like about 1% of the people I encountered would defy, especially after so long a time, like I said, 2 weeks to slow the spread, all right, and then it was like forever, and as you can see, they're still trying to, and I think eventually people are going to get sick of this. But then I think, or maybe not. Maybe some people like it. Some people have always wanted. It's comforting to have an earthly authority over you. But we have a republic. I'm not averse to kings if that be God's will. But so long as the republic stands, I will certainly speak the truth about the evils that come from authoritarians ruling over us. I would rather we remain a republic than, than anything else. So then the Isaiah sends to Hezekiah saying, this is by letter, obviously. Thus saith the Lord God of Israel, whereas you have prayed to me against the king of Assyria. This is the word which I have said concerning him. The virgin of Revelation, chapter 12, the woman and the dragon. The dragon, that old serpent called the devil and Satan. And he's tightly connected to the Assyrian. Because like I said, many of the prophecies concerning the Assyrian, the king of Babylon, even Pharaoh, king of Egypt, they're all types of the terrible king, of the evil king, the Antichrist, the false Messiah, the man who will save us all, the hero worship, but the one that does not fear God. I mean, think about what Satan must represent. What does Satan represent? He is an angel that sinned. Like, he knows God a lot more intimately than we do. And is so lofty in his opinion of himself that he is somewhat lost of God's fear. The devils fear and tremble, but not for the same reasons that we do. Not the reasons the godly do. I tremble before the Lord and before his awesome might. Not because I expect instant destruction or I know he wants to instantly destroy me, but because I have reverence for that power. It is terrifying. I know what it can do. But but the devils also know what it can do. But defy it. No, being much more, like it says in the book of Hebrews, it says, if you have come to a certain level, if you have tasted of the powers of the world to come, is one of the phrases used in Hebrews there. If you've come a certain way along the path of Christianity and you should turn your back on Christ, it is impossible to be reconciled to God. There's no place of repentance is the implication. And I don't think it's garden when you've come to a certain level of attainment, of real attainment. It uses a phrase like, tasting the powers of the world to come. And the goodness of God and of these other things, but it's like the powers. It's like that's it. When you receive the Holy Spirit, and there is a certain degree to which I feel like I've been sealed with the Holy Spirit, and that's why I've had an atheists get really annoyed with me, because when they say they prove God's real, I'm just like, I know God's real because when I called on Him, His power came over me. And I felt it on my hands, and they get pissed because they think it's a lie. But the truth is, that's why I believe, that's why I'm not particularly daunted by anything that people say about God, because I know when I called on the name of Jesus, the power was there. So you won't catch me denying the Lord, or if you do, that means I'm probably damned at that point. I'm damning myself because I'm way too intimate with the Lord. At least in that regard, I judge myself like that. So that's kind of terrifying. I mean, it's my own conscience says I should be strong enough not to deny the Lord. And Peter denied him. And he thought he would never do it. So I don't know. I don't know. It would depend on the context, just like with Peter. Sometimes it's not forgivable because of the reasons. Peter was caught off guard. How much attention? But the woman and the dragon, the earth helps the one, opens up its mouth, swallows up the flood which the dragon casts out of his mouth. The dragon launches this torrent out of his mouth. And it's obviously kind of like, what is it? What comes out of the mouth of the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet? 3 unclean spirits, like frogs at one point, right? And also remember when he talks about the part about the drying up of rivers, man. I mean, it's like, loose the 4 angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates. And the waters thereof was dried up, though the way of the kings of the east might be prepared. It's all connected. I mean, the prophetic, you're reading the same kinds of ideas in Revelation, and that's the people don't understand. It's like you have Isaiah on one hand and Revelation on the other, because it gives us a better understanding, I think a more detailed understanding, or let's say a more detailed, not understanding necessarily, but detailed knowledge of how to perhaps fit these things together a little better. Because I certainly think when I read Revelation, this informs my understanding. The dragon launches the flood. And that's like what the Assyrian has done here. He's launched a torrent of words, of threats. Which, if brought to fruition, would be like being overwhelmed by a flood. But if the earth opens its mouth and swallows the flood, meaning the words fall to the ground. I know I never thought of that. Let none of my words fall to the ground is a saying they would use. And the idea is, if the flood of waters just goes into the earth, it's like planting the... It says the earth helped the woman, but I don't understand how much... I think I was always distracted by the earth being sort of personified in that way. As far as the earth helped the woman, like the earth can help, as far as but of course, it helps just by being there and swallowing it up. And the world is a big place for a lot of threats to go around. There's a lot of words in the world. And the earth is a big place. It is hard for the voice to get out to all the ends of the world. But we know that the Lord's prophets will speak. And their voice will go out into all the world. And in fact already has in many capacities. It only awaits God's revelation to the minds of men. To those he calls. And he brings them to whatever understanding he needs them to come to. Whom hast thou reproached and blasphemed? Against whom hast thou exalted thy voice? Against the Holy One of Israel. I am the true God. That's why it says, his rage against me. The Assyrian thinks he holds the God of Israel in contempt. But he thinks he is no God. He's like the other gods. This God of Israel. He doesn't know that the true God, if it exists, is the Holy One of Israel. He doesn't get it, but he's about to get it. And we're not going to finish this chapter today. We're going to wrap up. Okay, so what verse are we on? I guess we'll say we're on... Yeah, the verse 20... All right, we'll start with verse 22. Oh, wait, I am the only one of Israel. Well, we're going to have to sort of recover those. I'll probably just read it and we'll start at... no, we'll start at verse 24. And but we'll read the whole chapter like we did today. We'll just keep doing that so we can... And hopefully I'll do an even better job. All right, thanks for joining this study. Look forward to being back again tomorrow. Until then...
And my hand hath found as a nest the riches of the people, and as one gathers eggs that are left, till I have gathered all the earth, and there was none to move the wing, open the mouth, or peeped. Shall the axe boast itself against him that heweth therewith, or shall the saw magnify itself against him that shaketh it, as if the rod should shake itself against them that lift it up, or as if the staff should lift itself up, as if it were no wood.